we're back. Back on the air. I always am tempted to do it like DJing. You're listening
Well,
to the Open.
that's your background.
Yep. You're listening to the Open Discourse podcast, number 9. I've been craving the DJing ability recently, where
You
I
miss
literally, yes, where if I'm listening to music and I switch from one album to another, I literally say the transition in my head.
Haven't you?
Over the time, and it's and coming up now at 3:55.
Yeah, I vaguely recall you telling me you applied for some local stations.
I have, not very closely, also because I have a certain amount of time experience on radio, but not skill or legitimate work experience at it. I'm being probably pretty disparaging, but I think I would be lucky to land a pretty basic position, not even on air, but just in a studio, a station. Anyway, you're listening to the Open Discourse podcast. I'm Jay. I'm here with Dave, and we hang out and we talk about some things.
Yeah.
So what's going on?
Well, I mean, anyway, hypothetically, a low position. Supposing the assumption here is that, corporate structure works the way it's supposed to in an ideal hypothetical, you would get at that low-level job and work your way up to wherever it is you want to be. Now, that being said, I don't think it does work that way, but...
Yeah, I think the ideal corporate structure is ruins that literally as a structure.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you have anything particular right now you wanna say? No.
Talk about topical.
Well, there's two things I could say. Oh, I thought you were gonna tell me to talk about something topical. Never mind.
I will in a second. I'm gonna date it real quick. It's Monday, February 27th, 2017, and I'm just seeing trending on Twitter right now is Pokemon Day. That is it's the 21st birthday of Pokemon, and not only am I coming across on Twitter a surprising amount of at least fetish adjacent fan art, lady characters with off-model large proportions.
I've never understood that, but continue.
It's definitely they're definitely all children in Pokemon, so that should be a significant point. But also that it's a 21st birthday, and I haven't seen anything about Pokemon drinking. That's what I want to see, is Pikachu with
with a big stein of beer,
or a lineup of 8 Jaeger shots would be cool.
Just all the starters of the first Pokemon taking shots,
or at least Pokemon themed cocktail recipes, like a Charmander that's a Fireball
I'm
and
sure it'll come.
This.
I'm sure it'll
Someday.
happen. I'm sure it'll happen soon enough.
I'm sure tons of those things already exist out there, but this kind of be the moment to start posting them. Speaking of shots, recently I had something called a pickleback, which is a shot of whiskey and then a shot of pickle juice, and
that sounds awful.
Fucking good.
Sounds awful.
I love. Do you like pickles generally?
I do. I just have a hard time reconciling the idea of those two tastes going back to back in my head. But, the experience and the idea are two different things. That being said, I can't really do shots anymore because of my health issues.
No, that's a shame. I was doing them with my roommate, and he hasn't had shots in a whole year, and I'm like, that's crazy. We should do more shots, more consistently. So,
yeah,
I'm done. What do you got? What's topical?
Well, there's one thing that's personal and one thing that's sort of topical in entertainment news. Which would you rather hear first?
Oh man, can you turn them both into one story?
I cannot, because they are very different.
Okay, then it's your call.
Okay. Well, I think on record you talked about Moonlight and recommended it to me. I still haven't seen it. It's on my to-do list. I've been just super tired and busy with personal projects.
Same. As soon as it's up for pirate on the internet.
And I'm probably gonna throw money at it because a friend told me that it was low budget amateur. So I'm willing to give money to people who I think deserve it.
And it's something we support politically.
Well, not even that. Just I am full on. I will throw money at creators that I think deserve the monetary support, because we exist in a market in terms of entertainment and media that has been sort of made into a for-profit corporate thing, and creativity doesn't necessarily lend itself to that, as you see with the overabundance of same and retreads and reboots. I meant sameness of stuff you see coming from big budget media, big budget games, big budget anything. And even if I do like it, I'm less concerned about paying for those, just because it's like, okay, well, I know my $10 is going to get filtered down through, like, oh, the CEO of the studio is going to take his cut, and the artists are not going to get that much. They get most of their money in royalties and whatnot, and licensing or something. And even then, most of them are super rich anyway, and I'm one person. And yes, I know the rhetoric of, yeah, but if everybody thinks, oh, it's just me, then nobody gets anything because blah, blah, blah. But yeah, whatever. Yeah. But anyway, rewinding.
I'll get that on the red box.
Rewinding, Moonlight won Best Picture. I think that's what it's won. And it did it in a very amusing... It did so amidst a very amusing mix-up. And I found it amusing just for watching people's reactions while it was happening, in terms of video, like the people who were on stage, like Ryan Gosling was cracking up the whole time. Because the movie La La Land was originally being announced, and there was a card mix-up. And so it actually went to Moonlight. But the ripple effect here was there was like huge flame wars popping up online now over like the whole political rigmarole around this, like, you know, from every extremist to centrist saying like, oh, you know, there are people saying like, oh, both movies are good, like both movies deserve respect, to some people saying like, yeah, we finally, you know, like finally a movie with that is like black centric gets it, or gets the recognition it deserves and stuff like that. Like, it's all over the place, to people saying like, oh, well, you know, I hate this push for diversity. It's annoying. Why do people make such a big deal about it? And it's, you know, just the general round of grousing and cheering that happens anytime something vaguely political occurs.
Yeah, like I can't even imagine. I can imagine that people are saying it, but I can't imagine what a conspiracy theory might be about why, or I mean, them doing that.
I mean, to be
like
fair,
having the mix-up. Like, what are people mad about with the mix-up? That like they think like, oh, they
be honest,
literally were.
I'm somewhat disconnected from this. I sent a message to a friend who is very sort of clued into that industry. If she would have wanted to come and talk about it, but she never got back to me because I took too long, and messaged her like really fast, like maybe 30 minutes to an hour before we started recording, and so that's on me. But if I do get her, we will definitely revisit the topic, because I'm sort of disconnected from that whole industry in the sense that I don't really follow it, and I enjoy things at face value, and when I see something that has like more of a message, I will generally acknowledge the message whether I agree with it or not.
Yeah.
As for this whole, like, I don't know. It again, like I can't really get into tons of the specifics about it, but to me, on the surface level, it seems to be that there are people that are happy that Moonlight won because it's, you know, an underrepresented story and an underrepresented type of movie. You know, it's a movie about a bunch of black people in a rough situation. And La La Land was a movie about a couple of white people trying to make it in LA, which has been done to death. Like, in one form or another. And, you know, that being said, I think I understand how people are like super happy about it, You know, because
Yeah, like
you
we
know
were
they
we
have a right to be if that sort of story relates to them in some way and it's getting no airtime because of reasons. Yeah, that you deserve to be happy to get that validation. You're entitled to that. But I also understand the whole like the gut reaction to when people say, "Oh, we got one over white people," because I don't think most people are saying that. But when people aren't really watching what they say and when they're excited, it can come across that way, I guess.
yeah.
Uh, you know, I get the gut reaction to feeling like put off by that. Like, okay, what?
Because
But
this was like because La La Land was presumably like a big studio, like big
well, it's
whole
not
whole
presumably.
production thing,
It
like Ryan
was.
Gosling, like white people romance movie. I haven't seen it,
I haven't seen it
and that
either.
like they think that wins, and that's kind of like okay, like de rigueur, like yeah, I expected that, but then like oh, whoops, switch out, and it is the sort of like more underdog, like uh culturally like culturally underdog like kind of film about
Well, my hope
uh
in seeing it and in seeing other trends, and I guess this will translate into a more big socio-political thing. If you want to keep on this, I can stop. But I'm
no
hoping that this year and the years following, are characterized in retrospect by a bucking of convention, because I don't think, and I think a lot of people feel this way now, regardless of what end of the political spectrum they're on, that it's just the way it is no longer a satisfactory answer. And you're seeing that in this with Moonlight and the reaction to it and its sort of rise, I guess, to acclaim.
yeah
You're seeing it with the sudden outgrowth of populism all over again on both ends of the political spectrum. And it's really well characterized by this video I watched a while ago. I don't know if you ever saw it, Jay, but of a guy asking Nancy Pelosi in an open town hall or an open forum, something, about, what do you think the Democratic Party is going to do to move left? A lot of the younger generation is starting to be less. They feel less amicable towards capitalism and they feel less adversarial towards socialism. They're warming to the ideals of socialism, because capitalism isn't working for us as a generation. And what is the Democratic Party going to do? Or is it going to move left, maybe, and try and get on that populist wavelength the way Trump sort of captured it on the right? And Nancy Pelosi's answer sort of came down to, ha ha, she actually laughed, ha ha, no, we're capitalist. That's just
mm,
how it is. And it was the most, it's just, and this was like a month ago almost, maybe. And
yeah
it's still, like I watched it earlier today, it's the most frustrating exchange I've ever seen. Because personally, I've been sort of sitting on that emotion a long time of like, well, just because that's the way it is, why does the thought stop there? Like,
yeah
why is just the way it is just good enough? I don't think that's acceptable anymore. We're clearly having problems, and something about the way it is has to change.
yeah
And I don't
um
have all the answers, but I'm smart enough to see that we're having problems.
yeah something a book my roommate gave me is that I've told you about, Dave, personally, is Capitalist Realism: Is There No Alternative, by Mark Fisher. And that what I would say to people listening to this is kind of recommended reading. It's very short. It's full of enough pop culture references and accessible enough language to get a motherfucker like me through it, which I haven't gotten yet. I haven't finished reading it, but
Mm-hmm.
it does. The subtitle "Is There No Alternative" is indicates that it poses the question: is there alternative to capitalism? And of course, yes, there always have been. But throughout the 20th century in America, like for reasons enough, uh, capitalism established itself in the cultural psyche as being the only thing that can exist.
Yeah.
And like the only way things are and the only way that things work and the gears turn and people get fed and go to work has to be like intricately intertwined in the downright violent and oppressive system of capitalism that, and not to like get too deep into why I would say that capitalism is
Well,
violent, but like capitalism, the violence of capitalism is the fact that there are more empty homes than there are homeless in the United States, and that people do die a lot, frozen to death in the winter,
I
like right
wouldn't
now.
characterize that as violence, just because I think violence is something that happens with intent. I think it would be criminal neglect if you want to classify it as something, or just morally bankrupt neglect.
I think morally bankrupt conscious neglect is active,
and this is just me harping on the same crap I always harp on. I'm a stickler for language, and I'm generally opposed to expanding definitions of words outside of a scope that makes sense. So when you're talking about violence, it's generally like a direct one-to-one, one person inflicting harm on another. I don't know if I feel so comfortable saying speech can be equivalent to violence, or that financial action be equivalent to violence. Unless you're like actively like causing quantifiable harm directly to another person. Otherwise, I'd just say it's sort of like whatever it was you said, like morally bankrupt conscious neglect, or even disdain.
And so if I see what you mean, because the linguism of it all like is kind of tough in that spot. But then if that's not the case, then we need to have like another word for what structural violence is.
Well, and I don't have a problem with coining new terms. I think we're in a time. I think there's this weird school of thought we have that all of human thought has already been had at this point in humanity's collective existence. I think that's bullshit.
Yeah.
I think to some degree there's a grain of truth there, in that, hypothetically or technically, we're all using the same wetware in terms of brains and neurons, and we've all got similar hardware and software, to put it in a computer analogy. So our thinking is going to follow a lot of similar trajectories. But I think it's bullshit to assume that all of human thought has ended, and that all progress has ended, and that everything that's great has already happened.
And so this is kind of something that like Fisher touches on. There's a cultural sense that capitalism is the end point of human history, of working through different ideas of how a society can be structured, and that it is the end all be all. It's reached its perfect form, which I personally definitely do not believe it has, because of it inflicting structural violence. And I don't.
Well, how it's been twisted and abused and twisted further, I would say.
I guess.
Well, because the initial conception of it makes sense. Allow everyone to attain wealth by sort of, I'm falling apart here, but the idea is sort of decentralization of wealth and labor. It didn't really pan out that way at this point, but that was the initial idea.
I don't know that much about socioeconomic theory, or political economic, or whatever the portmanteau is.
It could be socioeconomic or geopolitical, depending on how you want to look at it. Geopolitics is more of like international political maneuvering,
So I want to get back
to how the assassination of Ferdinand, Archduke Ferdinand, led to the powder keg of World War I type deal. That's geopolitics.
Yeah, I want to get back to the idea of defining structural and institutional violence as violence against large groups of people, because I personally think that's definitely something that our current generation, like going forward, not just us age-wise, millennial, but like the current era of discourse, has to be able to define and see getting out there in the world, and figure out how to put a stop to, because what we see recently is like a lot of certain legislation, like a lot of certain different like political and social ideas going through the system that enact a certain amount of vague, like hard to like big, broad, abstract concept, structural and institutional violence against large groups of people. And on the flip side, we see instances of direct physical violence, such as riots happening or Nazis getting punched in the mouth on television. And those are clear acts of physical violence against people or property. But like those exist in retaliation to the building up of structural and institutional violence that like the Nazis theoretically would put into place, and eventually Nazi ideology ends with, well, maybe not ends, but at some point results in acts of physical direct bodily violence against large groups of people. But like the current process of gutting the American educational system by a certain unnamed billionaire Betsy DeVos asshole.
Not unnamed.
Is something that is specifically going to really damage the lives of underprivileged people.
Well, that's
and,
something that could reverberate for generations. That
exactly,
kind of thing has long-lasting effects. And Sorry, I'll let you finish.
What I think is that like we now have to define and understand and recognize what structural violence is, because there are people, be this like the current administration or capitalism, you could say broadly, commits large acts of structural violence, but because it's something that takes 10 years down the line to register, and even then broadly and abstractly within statistics and data, is
it's abstracted away, the human cost.
Yeah, it's exactly, it's like it's so immediate, direct acts of physical violence that we'll see in crimes such as a mugging or a robbing or a drug dealing or something. Like these forms of crime violence are the result of larger structural violence of enforced like poverty or like segregation or general other kinds of forms of structural oppression. And specifically with capitalism is set up to say that people who are in poverty because of the environment that they are in, like those people are not the victims of the capitalist political system that maintains their poverty, which that like has to itself be an act of violence, is to put people in that position. No, our culture recognizes when that results in direct acts of violence.
Yeah.
But where was I tying this all back to?
Structural.
Like it's.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name. I can't remember the name of the case that like legalized abortion for a while. That was it? I can't remember that case. So that case happened in like during the time that like a crime wave was happening or something, right? Like in the 80s and 90s, there was this crime wave.
Yeah.
That people thought was going to like go crazy, and then just drops off. And people have traced that back to the result of this case getting passed for abortion rights. And
okay.
Abortion. Oh, Roe v. Wade. Yes. So the Roe v. Wade case of 1973 is like, I don't know if it's like officially fully accepted that like this was the connection made, that this is a cause and effect scenario, but this case came in 1973 that like allowed a lot more abortion rights to go on. And so what you then get like 15, 20 years down the line is this terrible crime wave that people were seeing happening, just boom, drops off immediately. And a lot of like statisticians or sociologists or whoever the fuck says stuff like this sort of stated it down that like this could be the cause, that like a lot, because abortions are now accessible, there are significantly less people being born into poverty or families that do not want them, and would lead to abuse, which would lead to who knows what other kind of factors that so much like vague, ambiguous, like sociological factors that lead into crime. So I would argue that the restriction of reproductive rights up to that point was an act of maybe not an act, but just like a legislation or just a cultural set point. Those restricted reproductive rights, that was an act of broad, vague structural violence that like no individual is like specifically responsible for, but that leads long ways down the line into acts of like specific direct physical violence, such as the crime wave happening. But that the release of that violence with the freed up reproductive rights, did that's like an instance where you see structural violence stopping in a certain regard and things getting better, and leading to like less acts of. So my point is all of this. When you see people rioting nowadays, those are like I'm a big dude with the MLK quote, like the right is the voice of the unheard. These are people These are people in group retaliating to structural violence that is so hazy and difficult to pin down that a lot of people resort to the simpler solution of like vilifying the rioters.
Well, see, that's the interesting thing with things like riots.
Like saying, well, they shouldn't do that or something, and that they're criminals for doing it, or they're dumb, or they're violent, or they're destroying their own community or something. And it's like the Starbucks is not the community. The Starbucks is a corporate entity that is part of structures and institutions that commit acts of like large, broad, vague violence against groups of people that, because they're such large, nebulous concepts. So what I'm saying is that we need to be able to recognize the large, vague, nebulous concepts of institutional and structural violence.
Right.
Because that's the real enemy.
To be fair, it's not always easy to see those as it's happening. It's easier to see them in retrospect in a sort of cause and effect relationship. But what was I going to say?
Yeah.
I don't remember. It was something to do with... the interesting thing about reactionary violence. And when I say reactionary violence, I don't mean it probably in a correct way, but I mean it in the sense of, people rioting in response to some piece of legislation that's just been passed, or people rioting in response to the behavior of local police, or, people vandalizing property during an election. We always, from just looking at historical trends, when it happens, it's always vilified. It's always vilified. Because there's no way to know if it's justified or not 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt when it's happening. However, depending on, because it usually happens in times of some sort of power struggle, social, political, economic, when the dust settles, it's usually retrospectively looked as like, okay, well, this was justified. So, like, the sit-ins of MLK that was so famous for during the civil rights time, that was very subversive when it happened.
Yeah,
that was really actually radical action.
And that was probably surely put off like in the media as like these guys are the bad guys for doing this.
And I'm not trying to equate that to, property destruction and violence. But what I'm saying is, nowadays we see people like the Freedom Riders in a sort of rosy-hued lens where, we know that they were justified.
Yeah.
But society at large back then did not.
Yeah, and there's like, I was seeing pictures about like the Freedom Riders buses torched.
I guess up. Yeah, and I guess that's an interesting thing, because I'm saying this and, I can't say definitively whether the violence we're seeing now is justified or not. Only time will tell, and I'm not trying to tell people go be violent either. I think that's stupid. I'm not going to encourage violence, but, there's certainly a cause for the violence.
Yeah.
And I think the only thing we can say is really time will tell as to whether it's justified or not, unfortunately.
Yeah. And until then, like I think it's more who you want to believe on what side of it. And as I've talked before, Dan Harmon's rule, like side on the people without the guns. When people riot in response to like
well,
an instance of
I'd
police
agree.
brutality,
I'd
and the police show up with the wackiest military hardware, then I'm like,
I tend to agree in that when there is a violent situation, look at the side that has the less power in the equation. But
do you think in the current political climate, like the Nazis could stage a riot? And how do you think that would go down? Because
I don't even know. I mean, they definitely
I saw, like,
could.
as a part of the Trump administration's, like, making their like terror index or something, they removed the KKK as a terrorist organization from their databases.
If they if they planned a riot, I don't know. Is it still a riot if they plan it? I guess it could be. But if they staged an act of violence, like big violence that couldn't be ignored, couldn't be, it's just local news, couldn't be swept under the rug at all. Like if we had another Kristallnacht. Do you know what Kristallnacht is?
I know what Kristallnacht is.
If we had another one of those, that would probably be the sound off for an actual war. Not necessarily armed rebellion, but some, more political upheaval than we're already having.
Do you think the government would do anything to stop white nationalists?
I think local governments would. I don't know about. I have no faith in our current executive administration.
Yeah. Because like
okay. Part of the thing what? No, I'm gonna pause real here. You write down what you're about to say because I have mean words to say. I have no faith in the current administration. And, in the Jewish community, there were some people recently and some news outlets that were making it fucking newsworthy that Donald Trump finally said anti-Semitism is bad at some sort of Black History Month type event. And it's like, I'm sorry, we're going to give this guy fucking airtime for the bare minimum of decency? Or maybe not even the bare minimum, because he hasn't come out and said anything else with regards to other human rights issues, but like just looking at it from a terms of anti-Semitism, good or bad, why are we giving this guy fucking press for the bare minimum of acceptable behavior, or for why are people suddenly like applauding him for fucking basic human decency?
Yeah, man, maybe he should have condemned anti-Semitic violence when that Jewish reporter asked him about it.
I'm sorry, but if we have to drag out a condemnation of anti-Semitism out of you, I'm not going to believe one word of it.
Lord knows what it would take to get him to denounce white supremacy.
Oh my God. Rant over. You can say your piece.
Pulling teeth. I was just gonna say that Nazis would probably never riot because they love that, like, oh, we're just calmed, we're gonna calmly debate for genocide, and slowly weasel their fucking way into the highest levels of national government because they will wait until the last second before enacting raw physical violence on the people.
I'd agree
so that they can hold their fucking because and I've talked about this before, because they exploit the concept of liberalism and political correctness to say whatever the fuck they want, but as long as they do it nice, anyone who's mad at them is a hyper reactionary, and they're the violent ones. It's that fucking political cartoon about the one dude, about the neo-Nazi, like sitting at the podium, like, I'm going to calmly discuss my plans for genocide, and the wacky hippie is like raising his chair, but like, I can only respond with violence because my position is somehow less valid than Nazism.
Right.
Anyway, that's my.
This is sort of where we disagree, because I think, you're right in the sense that it's piecemeal. You don't just sort of go from Obama to exterminate the Jews, if we're going to go with the Hitler analogy, in the sense that, you don't go from the systems in place under Obama to the systems in place under the, Nazi Germany at the height of the political craziness. Yeah. But I do think that to a point, you do have to engage these people. You can't refuse them a platform. You have to hear them out and debunk their statements and, defeat them on the neutral ground that is put forth by civil society. But I think that only goes to a point, when you reach the sort of shit we're seeing where there's actual violence in the streets, you can't just say it's all civil discourse anymore. And I think some of that comes with this weird notion we seem to have taken recently where speech can be equivalent to violence. And this ties back to me not liking the expanding definitions of language, because language is how we organize thought, and thought is how we rationalize or reach action. And I don't like equating violence to speech, but I think there are times where if you are calling people to arms, that is where I say you lose, in my mind, to me as an individual. I'm not saying this should be some sort of societal gold standard, because I'm sure there are problems with it. But in my mind, when you're making calls to arms, when you're openly advocating for the suspension of civil rights or civil liberties or what have you, you've lost your privileges. And I think I've said this before, so I'm not saying anything new. But I think saying violence is the only way to respond to people calmly arguing for white nationalism is a little misguided. But, I'm not trying to say that there's nothing inherently harmful to those arguments. All I'm saying is if they're speaking in public, you are entitled to refute them in public. And I think a lot of these ideas that are so rooted in misinformation can be defeated with information. But maybe I'm misguided in thinking that.
I don't know. I agree with you in the sense that
it's a relatively idealistic point of view. I will acknowledge that.
Yeah. I'm thinking like I would people say like let them have their podium, and clearly like the white nationalist peaceful ethnic cleansing ass arguments they propose will be exposed once they have a platform as the ludicrous violent bullshit it is. I would love to believe that were the case, but over the last couple of years that has gotten people elected president for things that you say you shouldn't shout them down, you should let them say their thing, and then rationality will prevail, and clearly it hasn't. That's my problem with it. And
I think you're right when you look at it as an isolated thing. I think we need to look at it though in a more grand context of the social environment and the political environment. And this, there's been a lot of this no platforming going on at colleges, and it's sort of led people down that piecemeal path to feeling in that adversarial relationship and being embraced by this white nationalism, and sort of slowly moving to the point now where you have these white nationalist rallies. And even then there's a greater context to the no platforming, but I think no platforming people has to stop, because what it does is, to the people being no platform, it vindicates them. They feel that, one, they get a martyr to point at. Two, they feel, okay, they can't handle what I have to say, so I'm right, and they're wrong. And that allows them to use that as a recruiting tool. It allows them to play out a victim narrative.
It allows them to say the media is trying to keep our views down.
And then when you have that imbalance of power over who gets to speak versus who doesn't, versus everyone can speak, it then becomes an issue of, people getting alienated as the concept creep progresses, and people moving further and further to the extremes.
I mean, I guess I can kind of see.
If you're
see what you mean. Where
you're saying that the neo-Nazi stuff is hateful, the white nationalism is hateful and violent, I would agree with you. But what about people who don't characterize it that way? What if we're sort of seeing it play out. They're the ones in power now. Are they going to start denying liberals platforms? Well, we're starting to see that with Trump refusing to let the media get equal access. And that's what I'm talking about, And again, we can't just say, well, because I don't want to pretend that white nationalism and neo-Nazism is on equal footing with what I would consider the minor sins of loud progressivism. But, when you start making structural allowances because you are correct, you cannot assume that the power that is inhabiting the structure will stay the same. And so that's why you have these allowances in place for civil discourse and stuff like that, and for debate. And that's sort of the root of my belief in it, because we're seeing it sort of turn around on us now, where we've made all these structural allowances for Obama because he was the progressive president that we liked, and Trump's abusing the shit out of him.
Hey, so
it's a tough topic. There's no easy answer.
I can see what you mean with all this, but like I don't know, like the civil discourse and the rationality and the peaceful the disagreement on politics and stuff has not effectively defended our national political landscape from a rise in Nazism, which it is the sort of thing that, like, at all fucking costs we cannot allow to happen.
Right. Right, and there is merit to the whole thing. If Nazism could have been defeated in debate, we wouldn't have gotten what we got. We wouldn't have had Hitler. Yeah. There's merit to that line of thought, but, and again, I'm an idealist. I'm sort of an optimist, despite my very cynical nature. I just want to believe that if we keep power, if we don't let power structures become too big, of lopsided in their handling with things, that it will never get turned around on us. And by us, I mean people who are generally left of center. Ooh.
Yeah. I had an analogy in my head a second ago.
You lost it?
About. No, I still have it. About but it's kind of like draws us back a little bit to talking about physical violence versus big structural violence and stuff, like
versus like structural harm. I would call it harm because that encompasses like the more abstract bad things being done to people.
Sure.
But you can call it whatever you want.
My visual metaphor that I have is like a dude can throw a brick at another dude, and that's like an act of violence.
Yeah.
But a dude who calmly and civilly uses bricks to build a huge wall and then tip the wall over, killing 10 people, maybe that dude should have gotten some bricks thrown at him in the process of building that large murder wall. That was not a great metaphor, but just that people like...
well, here's an analogy.
There are things being put into place right now that are going to lead to serious violence.
Here's an analogy for you that a lot of people will recognize as a, not in this context, but as a thing. So you throw a penny at someone, they're not really hurt, you've technically done them violence. Throw a penny or drop a penny on someone from the top of the Empire State Building, you've effectively just killed them because a bullet went through their head.
I like that. That's totally a myth that I love. The urban legend of dropping a penny.
Yeah. I don't think it's actually real, but like it's a like I said, it's a thing people recognize because everybody's heard that story of the penny at the top of the Empire State Building. Excuse me while my brain malfunctions.
The Eiffel State Tower. I definitely like. I've seen that same concept played out in a Tumblr, in a comic on Tumblr that was just like basic stick people, but like a scrawny dude like punches a big dude, like a big beefy dude, and he punches like a big beefy dude, and the big beefy dude like cries and stuff and like goes on the ground, and another big beefy dude runs up and like kind of slaps like the scrawny dude away, and that dude's like then bruised up and stuff because he got pushed aside by beefy dudes. I'm describing this really bad. Anyway, the one big beefy dude comforting the other big beefy dude is like, "Oh my god, I can't believe, what if he had done that to you?" And the scrawny dude's like, "I would be dead. If he punched me, I'd be dead." And that's what So that all ties back to the concept of the difference between these acts of violence is power structure. Whether that be the literal height structure of the Empire State Building or the dudes being beefy. It's like, I think that was used in the context of certain slurs, like
I mean,
certain
cracker
does not have the punch behind it as like the N-word does.
Here's I'd agree with you there, but my general yardstick milestone for acceptability, and this is in a general sense, not necessarily 100% correct all the time, but is something okay for one group? Is it okay for another group? And if it's not okay for another group, why? That's the follow-up question, because to me, I don't generally believe in contextual justification. I'm not really 100% a moral absolutist, which I think is the opposite to like moral relativism, which is a really popular ideology right now. Which I think is sort of what you're espousing.
Yes.
But I think I'm somewhere between the two in that I think, we shouldn't say one thing is okay for this group and write them a blank check without, and say it's not okay for another group for whatever reason without really thoroughly examining that and thinking about why that is. So, like, I'm trying to think of a hypothetical, because I do have some, but, like...
we're beating around the rhetorical bush, I think, to what egalitarianism is, which is...
Go, yeah.
Sort of like, everyone get treated the same, like, it's more like moral objectivism.
Yeah, that's kind of me.
Than relativism.
That's me. I'm a little hesitant to use the term, though, because I've heard it used as, like, a project by men's rights activists, and I don't know if I'm okay with that characterization, but I'm also not that involved in it, so who knows.
My understanding of egalitarianism is, like, everyone gets the same treatment, like, and that's the way it should be, and that's good. And I don't know, that should be the way it should be, but it disregards existing power structures, and it disregards, like, existing cultural power dynamics and stuff, which in the case of men's rights activists, they were saying, like, concept was like, is it okay to punch a dude, but it's not okay to punch a girl or something? And it's like, well...
To which I'd say violence is always bad.
Yeah, well, it's like, it's...
But continue, it's like, sorry, I'm being cheeky.
It's the same concept of people saying, like, oh, I don't see color, I don't see race. And it's like, well, that would be a nice world to live in if race was truly irrelevant, but you live in the world where it's not.
Right, and so that's kind of what I'm saying. Like,
be blind to it.
I agree with what you're saying, and that you can't disregard these things. What I'm talking about, though, is structural allowances, and my problem and concern, and maybe I'm just, useless hand-wringing, and, people are welcome to call me out on it, but my concern is when we start putting structural things in place, like you've said and I've said, the purpose of any movement is to put itself out of business. When you codify that into law, what happens when the situation that justified that law is no longer the case? So, like, I'll put this into... I want to try and put this in, like, a gender and race ambiguous way, but I'm sort of failing. But to sort of turn it on its head, suppose men were oppressed in the way that... No, I'm not even going to go there. So, I don't want to open that can of worms. Suppose that the roles of white people and black people in society were reversed, and that for whatever reason, white people managed to get a law passed that was like, if you're white, the government gives you more money because your socioeconomic status in aggregate is lower than that of black people. Mm-hmm. Clearly this is not the case. I'm going to say that again. Clearly this is not the case. But suppose it was. But then suppose that white people reached equality with black people in aggregate. Like, supposedly they passed legislation that allowed them to achieve equal socioeconomic footing with black people.
Yeah,
Would they
in
then
this
vote to
theoretical
get?
bizarro world,
Yeah. Would they then vote?
reparations
Would they?
for
Would they
centuries
then
of white
vote to do
slavery.
away with reparations? My understanding of human self-interest and behavior with regards to self-interest would tell me no, and you'd get to a situation where, over a long period of time, obviously, they would keep using this law to get one up over the other group. And now, I'm not saying that's what black people are going to do. That's why I reversed the races here, because I didn't want to get anyone angry, which probably speaks to something larger, I guess. But what I'm saying is, if you create a law to combat a specific inequality, when that specific inequality goes away, the law does not, or the institution does not. And institutions and laws, as opposed to movements, seek to perpetuate themselves, or even to further entrench themselves. And that's what worries me. And, that doesn't solve the problems of the here and now. So ultimately, my worrying is just that. It's sort of hand-wringing over nothing right now. But so I would place myself to pull back the conversation a little, somewhere between the extremes of moral relativism and moral objectivism, objectionism,
Yeah, I would say
objectivism. In that I believe in the ideal of moral objectivity, but I do recognize that there are contexts where things are not right, and that we have to do something to fix those contexts. My concern is just that if we suspend it, how do we put it back in place when the situation is resolved? And to directly contradict myself when I said I was an optimist earlier, I don't trust populations in general to act against their own self-interest when it comes to, okay, we're equal now. And I think you're probably going to call me on this, and I've called myself on it multiple times now, but it's sort of effectively useless hand-wringing, given that in the scope of the problems of the here and now, something needs to get done, and me going, oh, but what about 100 years from now, is sort of like, I don't want to say a distraction, but it's or not relevant, but it's sort of like,
at least like miring any action into like a lot of consideration.
and that's just the nature of who I am, though, is I tend to overthink things a lot. Like, I was the kind of guy in high school that when I was interested in someone, I would mentally like go over the situation in my head with like for months. I would agonize over, like, okay, why do I like this person? Should I approach this person? How will this all play out? To the point where I would lose interest in that person.
Yeah, because
like that's the kind of person I am.
Thought it out too thoroughly.
Well, I thought about it so much that I was like, no, I'm good.
And you talked yourself out of it.
Yeah, but like that's the kind of person I am, and it's sort of like this inaction, but due to deliberation. And I recognize that, and I recognize that it's not necessarily practical. I'm just saying that that's sort of where my head's at when it comes to these issues.
Yeah.
And that I think we ought to consider them, but that we shouldn't let it stop, stop everything. Because I think at the end of the day, there's no perfect solution ever for anything. And we can't stop ourselves looking for the one perfect solution to all problems forever, because that's stupid.
Man.
Yeah.
I'm like, let me dig myself out of this pile of words now.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
so how about those fucking Oscars where the social JWs hacked into the
social
JWs at the last second to make Midnight
La La Land just didn't campaign hard enough in the flyover states.
Oh yeah, that's all the.
All right, but
we've been ignoring all of the Middle America's needs
La
for
La
La La
Land.
Land.
Ignored the Rust Belt.
It's yeah.
But one other thing I've been thinking about a lot, and I don't know if you'll be able to relate to this, is sort of an internal struggle that ties back into what we were talking about capitalism as the end all. Whereas I've made a point to say I'm not a socialist, but I've been dwelling on this notion that, you know, why do people think we're at the end point of human thought? Because I don't think that. You know, I've never thought that it's the way it is acceptable.
Yeah.
You know, I recognize that capitalism is flawed, and there are parts of socialism that's appealing, but my problem with socialism, and this is what I'm struggling with, because there's so much about socialism that seems okay, but there's also a lot about capitalism that makes sense to me, that, you know, if you put in effort, you get, you know, it's like a one-to-one. You put in X amount of effort, you get X amount of goods and services, or, you know, purchasing power for X amount of goods and services in return. Hypothetically, it works. In practice, we're seeing what happens. But
yeah, because at some point it, like, I don't know.
Well,
I can't say that capitalism has worked super well over the last 100 years, but like as we've increasingly been automating.
Well, that's what I was saying.
I'm saying is we're entering post-capitalism, and capitalism is
not
clinging on for
not,
dear life.
Not post-capitalism, post-labor.
Yes,
and that's the problem. That's the linchpin, and that's what I was going to mention. Is I've been thinking about that and automation because I work in technology. I've known this was happening for a while, and I've just sort of not really thought it through. I was just like, oh, well, yeah, things get automated. Duh.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's a human cost to that automation in capitalism. And my issue is, with automation, we're approaching a post-labor endpoint.
Yeah.
So there's two things that could happen here. And one is we embrace post-labor society, whatever shape that takes, or we enter some sort of neo-Luddite, like, technology is bad scenario.
Yeah.
And either we're not really at that point of divergence yet, so I don't know which way we're going to go.
Yeah.
But what is when I started thinking about automation, I started thinking about the concept of a universal basic income, which I started looking it up, and I realized other people have been thinking about it too. This is not like a new idea I had, which I never thought it was, but it's something a lot of people conflate with, you know, a lead up to socialism, and that's sort of where I get into this personal debate, because the logical endpoint of capitalism and the logical endpoint of socialism rely on this weird notion of a benevolent dictator. You know, of someone at the top who's got everybody's best interest in mind. You know, in capitalism, it's the elevated status of the entrepreneur and the investor, just the entrepreneur. Investor was a wrench thrown into things, I think, that is part of why capitalism has gone so awry. But it was the entrepreneur, the businessman, you know. And in socialism, it's the benevolent ruler. It's the government who decides who makes sure everybody's getting their equal share. But to me, the benevolent dictator model doesn't work because you can't guarantee a benevolent dictator in a system built around one.
Especially because as I've seen and as I'm coming to understand it, like the benevolent dictator of capitalism is huge corporate entities, like the economic, like the financial elite, like fucking billionaires like Trump and Davos and shit.
Well,
so much rhetoric is about like we should cut the taxes on these big companies because they'll make jobs and and it relies on them doing that and putting money back
and not
into
just
the
taking the money for themselves
and cycling money heavily through. And they don't a lot of times, and they like resist like labor organization.
It relies on them not taking the money for themselves.
Yes, which they do. They fucking take and they put it in the Caribbean or in
Switzerland. I mean, look at the bailout early on in Obama's presidency. You know, look what happened there. A lot of people took pretty big take homes high up in those corporate entities.
Spent billions of dollars bailing out the airlines, and the airlines still fired
tons and tons of people.
So that what I've heard recently is like the idea of like taxing corporations heavily is not even so much, not even 100% in the sense that it wants to suck the money out of the top of the corporation into the government, but it wants to tax corporate profits so that like they can still make as much revenue as they have, but untaxable, like if it's to have less of their revenue in the profit margins for the tippy fuck face top of these rich billionaires, instead of just stuffing in the pockets of the billionaires, what they do with revenue is turn it back into more business about expanding and creating more stuff and doing more stuff and paying more people with more jobs. Taxing, what this all means is that taxing corporations heavily isn't just to suck money out of them, it's to encourage them to put money back into the world instead of keeping it all up at the top with them in their fucking
right.
Bahamas
agree,
bank account.
I agree completely.
And so that this concept of like to tax corporations more heavily will get them to push more of their revenue into their operations, thereby, you know, actually giving people jobs in the way that taxing corporations is supposed to generate jobs.
Well, the interesting thing is a lot of these notions and structures and ideas are, as far as I can tell, and I'm no expert, but as far as I can tell, they're holdovers from the Gilded Age. And if you don't know what the Gilded Age is in American history, it's, you know, roughly the time, I think, when Mark Twain was alive.
He was a gilded type of dude.
Okay, thanks. But
no. I sorry. I was just meaning like the sense of what I understand to be the Gilded Age, like suits.
Corporate structure wasn't quite the same, nor was investor culture quite. It really even I don't even know if it existed back then. I think it did in some capacity, but not nearly the same. But those were the days when you had people like Rockefeller or J.P. Morgan who single-handedly resuscitated the U.S. economy no less than 2 or 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a time that, you know, they had their problems and their economic woes. You know, there were robber barons, which is another thing. But those were the times where you had these people standing at the apex of economic achievement. Individuals, not corporate entities. Individuals at the apex of American economic achievement that were vested in ensuring that the mechanism worked, so to speak, the mechanism of America.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that anymore.
No, we have all of these like weird nihilist billionaires who just are like in this like sick game.
Well, we also have good ones. We have people with a moral conscience like Bill and Melinda Gates. We have the Ben and Jerry's guys. I think their names are Ben and Jerry, but I don't know for sure.
And
there
I hear
are
like Costco,
some good
like
ones.
those really progressive like hiring and labor
policies.
Like
there are some good ones, but structurally we have a problem. And I think another interesting thing that I've been mulling over in just my personal descent into madness over capitalism isn't working, but socialism isn't the best, like flat out socialism isn't the best idea either in terms of the, you know, benevolent dictator model I talked about earlier. You know, my descent into madness over, well, what should we do if neither of those are that great and those are the two warring ideologies, is that capitalism, there's this underlying assumption that I've never seen anyone talk about when it comes to capitalism, and that is of infinite consumption and production.
Well, this is another thing they talk about.
We live in a world
Fisher's
of
book.
finite resources, of finite time, of finite energy with regards to human energy, but also finite energy with regards to the world and maybe in a physics sense as well. So how can you have a system that assumes infinite production, infinite consumption, when you don't have infinite resources to fuel that infinite production and infinite consumption?
Yeah. This is something Fisher talked about in the book Capitalist Realism. Hey,
You're just going to keep plugging that book until I get around to reading it, aren't you?
Until I get around to reading it also.
Oh, okay.
But it definitely raises the question, like, what is the post what like, and with so much automation, like what is post-capitalism, like,
Well, and
and
it's
like so
interesting.
many institutions and certain drives and stuff, like this is something designed to put itself out of business. And like, what does that mean? And like, what does, I don't know.
Right. And,
Yeah,
what comes next? I have no clue. And that's what's been driving me insane. Because I think we're reaching that tipping point.
I think
Um,
people are ready for it. I think the world is ready for it.
well, I don't know if the world's ready for it, but I think we're reaching the point where it's becoming necessary. That's what I mean when
Yeah,
I say the tipping point.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and, it's interesting because for all our anxiety about artificial intelligence, something I've considered is, what if you put an artificial intelligence in charge of all the stuff that isn't, like, basically the production of goods and services, and implement a universal basic income, and from there, if people want to work for more than the universal basic income, they are welcome to, but they don't have to.
I'm
um,
literally in my sister comic. I am world building that. Um,
but
anyway,
there's issues inherent to that as well, and it lies with, how can you trust that the AI, because an AI is programmed by people, how can
yeah,
you trust that there won't be issues with that system? How can you trust, or if you build an AI with a hypothetical learning algorithm, how can you trust that it won't turn on people, which is, the overplayed, uh,
it's what AIs do. They
Terminator,
turn on humans.
well, the overplayed Terminator situation,
Yeah,
Skynet going rogue, and then how can, there's a lot of assumptions in what I've said, and I don't think it's really all that feasible, but it's,
and so
yeah, we're getting to the point where I have nothing of value to add. It's just like, well, what if, because
what if this? What
that's
if that?
we need to move away from, because even my problem with socialism is even that this is a notion that was conceived of a long time ago, and we are dealing with problems that they could not have possibly foreseen or understood back then. It's my same case with, I get that the Constitution is a really good thing, but it's a document that was written a couple hundred years ago, and we're starting to see the cracks, so
Yeah,
to
yeah.
speak, in stuff that wasn't accounted for. Like when people talk about the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms, yeah, the idea was that, and I've said this before, haven't I? That the idea was, so that people could rebel against a tyrannical government. But if that's the case, why are we not seeing like military drones and stuff like that being made available to, to ordinary citizens?
Or rather, maybe that the police shouldn't have military equipment. That's
Well,
also something that has to do with the ability for
right,
people's militia to arm themselves against the
but what I'm
government.
saying is back then, arms was, you know, and this is an argument now that's been done to death, the musket. If you had a musket and someone else had a musket, you were on equal footing. There was no notion of attack helicopters, fighter jets, tanks, drones, hacking, you know, all sorts of stuff. And so it's a good guideline, and I think the spirit of it is well intentioned, but since clearly our system is so focused on enforcing the word rather than the spirit, problems are happening.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a big strife filled tipping point that is not even a point. It is like a long
But yeah,
struggle of
anyway,
figuring
my
it out.
my general issue is like, and what I find heartening is I think we're starting to see people bucking the idea of the establishment on all parts of the political spectrum, for good or for ill. Uh, I will say that, and I think that it is the way it is not is hopefully will become less and less of an acceptable answer to a question.
Yeah, yeah. Status quo is the enemy all the time. Always. That's the lesson. That's a take home. Is always think about the way it can be done better.
Well,
Uh,
exactly. Like, why should we stop looking for better just because we have something that's sort of okay?
and So
You know,
what this
because
book
like,
is,
oh, well, look at all the other, you know, when people argue about capitalism and socialism, you know, the response you tend to get when you poo-poo one or both is always, oh, well, look at everything else. They've all been terrible. And it's like,
yeah,
okay, so I guess we're just done thinking up of new ideas, right?
yeah. I guess we'll just sit in this fucking
Like,
sit in this
I guess
swamp
Karl
forever.
Marx in the 1800s thought of it all, huh?
Yeah,
Or
we're
I
really.
guess, you know, the fucking people, the merchants back in the 1800s as well. The
Oh,
industrialists thought of it all, huh?
I had this fucking quote brought up when we were talking about this earlier. Charles Dwell, way back in 1899, the commissioner of the U.S. Patent Office in 1899 is famously known for saying everything that can be invented has been invented
That's stupid.
in 1899. Yeah, I mean, there's
And,
like
you
I don't
know,
know, there's
I guess, do you have anything else to say? Because I'm going to sort of move.
I'm pretty good.
I
I'm,
think
I'm
maybe the obsession with us being at the end point of human culture or human innovation is the notion that at any moment technically we could render ourselves extinct. And I think that leads to this sort of subconscious notion that we're moments from the end.
hmm, yeah, I see what you mean, and I've been thinking about how that characteristically, like over the last like who knows how much time, after the invention of like the nuclear weapons and stuff, and humanity had like capability to be apocalyptic, that permeated the cultural mindset to be like a certain like new form of nihilism, imagining that anything could die whenever.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know. It's literally the end is nigh syndrome.
Yeah.
Weird. And I wish I had more to say about that. I wish I had read the book that I imagine there is written out there in the world.
Huh.
But so I'm pretty burnt on big, tough concepts.
Okay, so you got
What
something?
else? Huh?
You got something else?
I
Because
want
I
to.
think we've reached a natural conclusion to that discussion. We're both
hmm
sort of.
But it seems to be at some point in our discussions, always we start to delve into like more nerd stuff,
Hmm.
lighter topics, nerd stuff that leads into its own sort of
More
like
heavy
high
topics,
concept.
yeah.
But we start with that, and something that I've been on recently is VHS tapes,
Huh.
specifically of yes, this is my retro thing, because they say like everything is like the next. People say the 90s are coming back, or like the 80s are happening, like the 90s are coming back again in the retro cultural cycling. Um, and yeah, maybe that's just me. I've seen enough cool like vaporwave, synthwave stuff that I'm like, I'm gonna find my parents' old VHS tape. I'm gonna like get these old family videos. I'm gonna look at this shit. I'm gonna order. And what I did was I went to a bookstore and bought way too many like old movies and shit. I got Point Break, which I just watched for the first time like the other day.
What's that
Um,
movie? I've never heard of it.
that is a fantastic. I think it was like a fucking defining cop action film. I believe it was 1991.
You mean Kindergarten Cop wasn't the defining cop flick of a generation?
It was it was the most defining cop with children cop film. The buddy cop film where it's one cop and a bunch of
Yeah,
toddlers.
where the buddy is a
Where the
the
buddy
buddy
is
is a
a
collection of children.
I haven't seen Kindergarten Cop, but I know he says shut up real big. Anyway, Point Break is a film about a young Keanu Reeves, which there is no other Keanu Reeves. He's still like
Dude,
22
I
or
wish I
something.
had those kinds of genetics where I would never grow old visibly, but
He,
still
I
age
think it's
inside.
I think it's less genetics and more secret Hollywood billionaire surgical treatments and face, injections of the, the blood of baby birds or
Maybe,
something
but
into
I
his
just know
skin to
that
keep him
people
young
have
forever.
stopped carding me when I get alcohol because, I quote, you have eyes that look tired all the time.
Well, you're in comp sci, so that sounds right. Um, Anyway, Keanu Reeves plays a cop who goes undercover to foil bank robbers. These bank robbers, who in this movie are credited with starting the trend of bank robbers wearing president masks. This was the president bank robbing gang, the initial, led by, spoiler alert, Patrick Swayze and his band of surfer dudes. So it's a crime, solve the mystery, go undercover, find the dudes, become one of them, and then bust them story mixed with an adrenaline junkie extreme sports twist where they surf and they skydive and they do all this wacky shit. It's very fun. It's very intense. It's a very good movie. My roommate and I watched it very hungover this past Saturday morning, and it's exactly the kind of movie you want to watch hungover the next day. And it fucking cured us, honestly. We felt so much better after watching Point Break. My point is with all this, I've got some classic movies. I've got the original Rocky, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to watch that, and I'm going to tell him about all the ways that it's racist or something. Dead ass, because Rocky is a white power fantasy about a scrappy white dude defeating Muhammad Ali to delegitimize the accomplishments of Muhammad Ali.
I don't know if that was the intent. Maybe that's how it comes across to you.
I've heard analyses.
I would say if you want to make an argument for the white supremacy, it's that it's supposed to be a universal underdog story, but really it's sort of put into a black and white dichotomy because Universal is assumed to be white. That's what my takeaway would be if you want to reach that result.
I've seen it compared to movies like in the same vein of, in the same way in Back to the Future, they credited a white boy with inventing Johnny Be Good to steal that accomplishment away from.
Oh God.
Christ, I can't remember his name. I feel bad. Anyway.
I mean, so I think that was a gag. I don't know. I think there's merit to analyzing media and narratives and
Chuck Berry,
all that stuff. But I think at some point, it's worth analyzing maybe the underlying assumptions. But I think, like in Back to the Future, they're attributing this thing a black guy made to a white guy. I think that was supposed to be a joke because he came back from the future and popularized a song. I don't think they're supposed to take away...
The takeaway message of Back to the Future is not that white people invented rock and roll. Don't believe what you see. No, but just that is a subtle message that they put out there.
Maybe, I guess.
So, unintentionally, presumably. So... my point I'm getting to talking about all this fun VHS wacky bullshit is actually that I've been ordering a lot of old 90s, early 90s cyberpunk anime.
Oh no.
You better believe it.
Ghost in the Shell?
I've been holding on to this Akira VHS for a while, and let me tell you, it's the bad dub. Every line is fucking bad. I love it.
No.
Because I'm a fucking piece of ironic hipster garbage. You know me.
Well, I know you.
And let's see, I got a Pat Labor. I got Sin, the movie, which is about mutant vampires. I got Cyber City Oedo 808. They only made 3 episodes of it, and I have all of them on VHS. Cyber City 808 is credited with having the classic line on the English dub, "Hey Bennett, don't crap your pants if you see a vampire out there," to which Bennett responds as he climbs into a cybercar, "Get lost. You wouldn't recognize a vampire if one jumped up and bit you on the end of your fucking dick. So just get off my back, okay?" And then squeals out in his cool floating cybercar. I love this shit. Huh. I was psyched about this. I've been getting these in the mail, and I was watching Pat Labor a couple days ago. My roommate was telling me, is this you manifesting a desire to stick with childhood stuff with all of this retro thing? It the retro ethos of nostalgia and this old stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't grow up with any of these animes, but I'm just romantic about the aesthetic of old anime on VHS. So I don't know about that, but that's literally where I'm at with
I can
retro
understand
culture
that
wave.
Because I have a Super Nintendo that I got from a friend, and I've bought games for it, and I won't say games were objectively better back then, but I do admire the way that the technical limitations forced creativity in ways that we don't have now.
Yeah.
But it
Oh,
also limited in other ways, that we have things that are being presented now that never could have been presented before, in that medium.
yeah.
Like the
I
emotional impact of Shadow of the Colossus
Holy shit.
would never have been possible under the limitations of the Super Nintendo era.
Yeah, yeah. I gotcha. Um, fuck, where was I gonna go? Oh, I was seeing something that was just like compared the like actual like old SNES pixel art, which was like some like imagine some shit like Metal Slug, like that is a fucking
8-bit or
whole
8-bit or 16-bit.
16-bit, I would say,
Okay,
that
so
is
Super
itself
Nintendo,
like
yeah.
or yeah or 8 or 16, I don't know specifically, but like
Well, NES was 8-bit, SNES was 16-bit.
yeah, where I don't know, like they did so much with the limitations they had. Something like Metal Slug, it has like beautiful art and beautiful design, even though they were like confined to like really limited palettes and like data amounts. And then compare like a the sort of like modern indie, intentionally pixelated, harkening back to that kind of stuff. But it's I don't know, it just like exaggerated it to the extent that the like really like excessively basic pixel stuff is more of an expression of limitations without any of the striving within the limitations.
Mm.
So the modern like quote retro styled pixel
I've
graphics
gotten
of
very
some
sick of
indie
it, to
game
be
is
honest.
like, yeah, me too. They show these like modern retro styled things are very excessively simple and very dull as a result.
It's endearing when done well, but it almost never is.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So,
I would say my favorite example is a game called Shovel Knight, which is not actually restricted to 16 bits when it comes to the music and the visuals,
mhm.
but it sort of apes the style enough that it evokes that nostalgia while still being really amazing.
Yeah, and it does it well. Like,
And there's a lot of care put into it.
yeah. Um, I can't remember what this thing was. Like, maybe like for instance, what was it that like Potato Seeks the Truth?
Huh?
Mr. Potato Seeks the Truth with an F. Is just an example of like an excessively uh done down pixel thing. Potato Man Seeks the Truth. And I hate
Uh-huh.
saying that because it's TROOF and it's driving. It's I don't know. It's weird.
But what is it?
It's a it's a modern indie game that is
Okay.
retro 8-bit styled, but it
Sorry, I
is
lost it for a
so
moment.
it is just like paper cutout pixel bit. It doesn't look great. Anyway,
Mm.
well, that's totally not what I was trying to get into about this stuff. Just that I'm like finding myself on the surface of retro styling movement stuff, and I don't know. Should I feel like am I recognizing enough that it's dumb, like in the certain ways that like romanticizing, especially like
I
clunky
mean,
old media formats for, but like you do it because you like the clunk of it, like Point Break during a chase scene when Keanu Reeves was bit by like a dog in somebody's house. I swear to God, there was this foot chase scene where he's chasing down a bank robber, and it does the Ferris Bueller like jumping through people's yards and like through their houses and shit. That
yeah.
I can hear that Ferris Bueller music. Um, but I heard the VHS and the machine just like grinding a little bit and like static, warped, like distortions, all kinds of stuff are like on the screen. I'm like, this is why you get it on VHS because this is a little bit of goddamn flavor, to the format.
I mean, I don't think there's really all that much harm in it. I would
No.
disagree, but uh, I think there's a certain degree of things that are harmless. Like if you enjoy something and you're not harming anyone else, like, who the fuck cares?
What if the thing that I'm enjoying is advocating for genocide? It's not harming anyone because I'm just advocating
Well,
for
no, no,
it.
that's not true. Advocating for something implies you want it to happen. You're trying to rally people to agree with you or to enact what you're
Yeah,
proposing.
but it's just words, man. I didn't mean to bring it all back to this,
Yeah,
but
I would disagree with you.
I just saw an opportunity there.
But
Anyway, um, so yeah, thank you for giving me the validation that I'm cool for watching VHS tapes.
I don't know about
Uh,
cool, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
I've been wanting to get like a record player for a long time, but that's the
Oh,
sort of
my dad has an old clunky record player.
yeah. I would love. Over this last summer, I was living with people. We had a classic like Fisher Price plastic children's record player that we
Oh, good
listened
lord.
to a lot of gangster rap on.
Eh.
Um, so it's pretty cool. Something like about my personality and the way I approach these retro things is that when I was with my friends in a Goodwill, scrolling through their vinyl, I managed to pick out every single Hawaiian like music of the waves, Hawaiian music shit. Real like I've got like 7 luau fucking records. Because that's just what I gravitate towards. Because there's the kitsch to it. That like I don't know. It's also just like it's good like chill listening music.
Mm.
It's valuable in that way.
Oh, did you ever?
That's
Do you have
probably a
anything
little bit
else?
like
Anything
it's
else?
probably a little bit like low key racist towards the Pacific Island cultures.
Oh,
Uh, anyway, no, that's about all I have to say. I like
yeah. I was gonna say
VHSs. I like
before
old bad
I
anime.
cut you off. Did you
Uh,
ever watch Luke Cage?
nope, still
I
haven't.
think Luke Cage is a pretty good example of representation done well, if not right. I would say it's done right. Maybe people disagree with me. They're welcome to. Again, I sort of live in my sort of introvert isolationist bubble. I go to work, I come home, I play video games, I go to sleep. That's about the extent of my life.
Hmm.
Um,
Welcome to adulthood. That's um,
but if you
I think
haven't
it's good. I
seen
think
Luke
it's good
Cage,
representation
I
in that
highly
it's like
recommend you do. Did you ever watch that video I linked you to?
no, I don't believe so.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna propose we do something a little unusual.
Let's do it.
Um,
Dear listener,
I
Dave sends me
say
a lot of links on a daily basis, and I
because I get
do
bored
not
at
really
work.
look at
Okay.
most of them. I'm sorry.
um,
What you should do, I think.
take a few minutes right now. Watch the video. We can cut it later. Maybe even cut what I'm saying right now later, and then we can talk about it. Because I
You know
think
what?
to me that video I sent you, one, it's a rap by one of the members of Wu-Tang Clan. I think. I might be wrong. Again, I live in like my own universe sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's I think it's really we'll discuss it after you watch it, unless you don't want to do this.
I do want to do it.
All right,
I'm
all
trying
right.
to find the video right
All
now.
right.
What I think
So
that I
I'll
might
keep
suggest,
recording, but
Dave,
we'll
what if
cut
you
this.
have,
Yeah. Yeah,
huh,
yeah, yeah.
what if you have certain things, yes, Luke Cage of Bulletproof Love. We will link this in the description so that you, listener, can pause and watch at home. But what if when you send me a lot of things, you let me know if and when you do also post them to, say, our Open Discourse Facebook book group,
Oh,
Facebook book,
Facebook book.
prompt.
Actually, I've really been neglecting the Facebook page.
That's what I
Ugh.
was thinking, prompting me to have to get on and comment a response on the link you post on the
I was
Facebook
gonna
group.
say, I would post more on the Facebook group if I thought people would uh, interact. It's sort of why I stopped writing as well. One, I'm not a great uh, article writer, but also I just wasn't getting a lot of reaction, and my
Yeah.
whole intent was reaction or interaction rather, and so I sort of eased off on all of it. But hey, if
Yeah.
we could get a back and forth going on the Facebook page or even the web page that my associate Quay unfortunately had to we cough up a little bit of money for, that'd be great because we'd get those going. But yeah, we'll cut for a bit and you'll watch that video and then we'll discuss because I think one, I think this will convince you to watch Luke Cage. Aside from the fact that the guy who won an Oscar for being in Moonlight is also in this.
Oh yes.
Um,
Maharash.
but there's an underlying ethos to the first season of Luke Cage about the situation of black people in America and Harlem. And granted, it's sort of jazzed up or prettied up to in like a I didn't mean it that way.
Jazzed up was a little racist?
No, but I realized it was inappropriate after the fact, just because it's an odd saying. It was sort of, prettied up, cleaned up for like a mass market comic book movie tie-in appeal, and you have to grant it that in order to sort of play along with it. But yeah, okay, stopping now. You're gonna watch the video, and we're gonna cut some, and we're gonna talk about it.
I have to go back a couple times and keep track of raps. My slow white brain can't process.
Oh,
raps.
to process the lyrics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my god, the line, I just want want my 40 acres and some carrots on the wrist.
Yeah, dude, there's a lot in this sequence to unpack.
Get a cottonmouth plucking ashes off the cliff.
Cottonmouth is a villain.
I know Cottonmouth is the villain. Wow, that was cool.
Yeah.
That was, man, shit is getting so very relevant, so very powerful.
Exactly.
We are officially back currently. I have linked in the description to the Luke Cage Bulletproof Love segment.
I was very surprised that scene didn't get more traction.
Luke Cage now on Netflix. Check it out. Plug.
Because, man,
very topical rap,
to
not
me,
only about
that was an
trials and
intense
tribulations of Luke Cage.
That was an intense sequence, and there's actually they released an actual single of that song with a bit more post-production value, without the banter and imagery visually, of course. But the sequence, I thought it was really intense, and the imagery of a bulletproof hoodie. I was surprised people didn't pick up on the bulletproof hoodie, outside of the context of the show, and start making that a thing. Because I saw that, I was like, holy shit, they went there.
For those of you, just to give you a sense, I guess at some point in Luke Cage, he got involved in some things that he became. He was framed for killing a cop. He was on the run or something. But he got shot up at a certain point, but because he's Luke Cage, he's fine. But his hoodie was all bullet holed, and then as he becomes a hero of the community,
people start passing out bullet hole hoodies with
and that
hoodies,
becomes the
hoodies
style.
with bullet holes ripped into them.
That's that wearable protest, and you see some dudes
there's an APB out for Luke Cage. And so they start pulling aside black people wearing bulletproof hoodies, and they're not Luke Cage.
And the hoodies aren't bulletproof, distinctly.
Or did I say bulletproof hoodies? I meant to say bullet hole hoodies.
Yeah. and you got some dudes mugging at the cops about yeah, we're wearing bulletproof hoodies. Fuck you, man. It's yeah, shit, man. And
the lyrics,
I wonder if anyone is trying to. I wonder if anyone is
doing
that fashion up at protests.
I'd hope so, because I think I think Luke Cage had some undertones to it that are worth exploring, despite the fact that they've been sanitized a little for mass media, as I'm sure many people will angrily tell me. But I feel like there was a lot worth exploring in that show that just didn't happen for some reason. And this sequence in particular still stays with me. And maybe this is just me being a privileged piece of crap, who knows. But the sequence stuck with me because of the imagery alongside these really intense lyrics. He starts referencing the whole 40 acres and a... This is
the real Method Man making a cameo in the show to rap about Luke Cage.
Oh, I'm blanking out. 40 acres and something else.
Yeah, the line was I just want my 40 acres and some carrots on the wrist, and carrots gold.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And it's just
which expresses
man.
Black Americans' desire, basic desire for a nice life.
Well, and
while alluding
it's
to
referencing that terrible
slavery reparations.
The really bungled slavery reparations of a long time. Well, like 100 years ago now.
I don't know. Back when
Not even
I don't know,
100
back
years
then
ago.
was land like reparations.
Well,
You get
no, it was
40
over
acres.
100 years ago, I think, wasn't it? I'm getting
Yeah,
confused.
it was definitely earlier than 1917.
But yeah, and the lyrics were really like intense, and the conversation up to it was intense. And Method Man himself said in that scene, like, there's something really powerful about a bulletproof black man. And
Conceptually.
he said something also like superpowers come second to being black or something. I didn't watch the video with him because I've seen it a million times, but clearly
Yeah.
I don't remember what happens in it.
It
but
was to that effect.
it was to the effect of like what comes first, like being black or being bulletproof, something like that.
Yeah.
But fuck, I'd wear a bulletproof hoodie.
I would too, but I wouldn't look like it.
I was gonna say the impact would be lost.
I would like
think.
it would definitely send the message like, is this white boy's a symbol of solidarity, a reference to some comic book shit?
Yeah, I mean that's why I said I think it's powerful, but maybe I'm just being a privileged little shithead when I say that.
Yeah, it's powerful and it's a symbolic thing. And definitely it is such a mug. If I'm using that correctly, it's just like it's a good spit in the face to a certain sense of institutional violence with airs of white supremacy to it.
Well, and the whole like unidentified black male thing.
Yeah, that it unites people in like a solidarity that can send a message to like the police and that kind of systemic injustice, and the fucking specter of police brutality that says like if shooting us is all you have to keep us down, it's not gonna in
a world where there are bulletproof people, it's not gonna work. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'd like to think that.
Okay, yeah, you're saying
the ethos of that message extends out. We're saying like the police brutality is not going. Police brutality and this violence is not going to continue to oppress us.
Yeah, and something I think that I don't know if you know the history of Luke Cage, Jay, but in the show at least, he's, and I think in the comics as well. Luke Cage is an assumed name. He is an ex-convict who was used as human experimentation, or used for human experimentation, and underground inmate fighting that the prison guards were betting on. That's sort of like the backstory that's introduced. In the show, at least, it's introduced like sort of
on every level.
I want to say
system
midway.
Yeah. Wrong.
But I think that will add some extra appeal for you.
Okay,
in the context of Luke Cage being an ex-con and Luke Cage not even being his real name, because technically he's still a wanted man.
Or I thought you meant in terms of underground prison gambling fights. You know how I love those.
Yeah, you love the prison fights. Jay just loves the prison fights. And he doesn't actually love the prison fights.
It's fucked. That is like some of the darkest shit. That is more or less straight Stanford prison.
And
and
it's there's probably more socio-political discourse in the fact that Luke Cage is an ex-con.
Yeah. Literally everything about this character in the show seems highly culturally and politically relevant right now.
Well, it's interesting because it's politically charged in a way that Daredevil wasn't.
Daredevil turned into ninja fights.
Well, and that's all Daredevil has been, though.
Yeah.
It's been I'm blind and I do ninja stuff and I fight ninjas.
And also I have moral conflicts about whether or not to kill people. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and also sometimes I'm a lawyer. And I deal with the problems of the legal system.
Yeah,
which I guess is sometimes
we deal with structural injustice.
I was gonna say, I guess sometimes that's a bit of a political takeaway from Daredevil. Not so much. Well, actually, yeah. I guess with the show as well, you could argue. You've watched Daredevil, I think, right?
Yes.
You could argue that there's some political commentary in the fact that you have Wilson Fisk, who is effectively, a thug.
Mr. Untouchable.
He's using money
Yeah,
to
he's doing
sort of
everything
break.
like functionally, legally to destroy people's houses.
It's really
and
just
displace a large group.
Yeah,
of
it's really
impoverished
just the
people.
source of his income is what's illegal, but he's using his money to buy influence and do all these things that we would consider bad within the bounds of the legal system,
Yeah.
or even to bend the rules.
He's
Most
wicked
notably,
white-collar criminal.
there's an episode of Daredevil that opens with a guy just committing like just 0 to 100 murder in plain sight, and the episode ends with him getting off. Granted, the guy kills himself because he revealed Wilson Fisk's name to Daredevil, and he's like, oh no, he's gonna come after me. I'm gonna kill myself now.
God, I remember that bit spooked me because he slams his face into a spike and
it was super messed up.
Right up his brain.
But from a legal perspective, it ended when he walked out that courtroom.
Yeah, it fucking,
like a man got away with murder in plain view.
Yeah. But I don't know, something like always rings a little bit hollow about stuff like that, like as it actively like challenges injustices like in the justice system.
No, this is like me reading a lot into things. It's not like Luke Cage where you have moments where they're explicitly saying like stuff's messed up.
Yeah. It definitely, like, Luke Cage has definitely hit me more than at any time in some sort of like Daredevil / Batman / whatever, like realistic ethical superhero like has a villain that is untouchable by the law.
Yeah, and to continue my commentary on Marvel Netflix TV series, if you look at it in a certain way, I suppose you could take Jessica Jones as an allegory for like a rape survival victim, in that people don't believe her, or
I don't think
it's wrecked her life and she has PTSD.
I don't think there is a way to not take Jessica Jones as a story of rape survival.
Well, I meant as an allegory about rape survivors and how they're treated in a general sense, as opposed to a story about one rape survivor.
Oh yeah,
that's kind of what I was going at. Did you ever finish that? Because I remember back in our college radio days, I tried to convince him to watch it, and it was too emotionally intense for him to get through much of it. So I don't know if you ever finished it.
Finished Jessica
Jones? Yeah.
Yes.
You did?
Yes, I did, because after a while, I don't know if I got acclimated to it, or it's sort of like just itself tapered off into like, they did all this like adventure, running around trying to catch him in these different ways.
It's sort of a sine wave with that show. That's how I took it, where the beginning was super front loaded with like intense discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the middle, you sort of have a de-escalation of that discomfort into sort of anger and like, the stuff that happens. And then towards the end, you get that anger again, because it's like the super ham-fisted hope is dead scene. Not to, take away from the emotional impact, but I feel like that line sort of pushed an already really obvious metaphor a little farther than it needed to be pushed, personally.
Yeah, I vaguely remember the bit where Hope dies, the character named Hope, which,
And then somebody says to Jessica Jones, Hope is dead.
Yeah, there's a little bit to read into there on what they really meant by that.
No, it's like, do you get it? Do you get it? It's a hopeless situation.
Naming your character Hope was already, like, really...
it was hands
of ham.
It was a little heavy-handed.
So nothing in that show spooked me deep down to my core harder than the end of that first episode, where it shows like the extent of like this is what his control does. He makes people kill, and then like he can get people to kill themselves, and like that really. That just really struck me so deep and so dark. Especially when I was watching that first episode, I was crazy wired on all kinds of caffeine, so I was
Oh yeah, that would mess you up.
really sensitive to shit, and I just got spooked to pieces. But then like even at the end, it was kind of just. Oh, I mean, this is spoilers for the end of Jessica Jones, but when he does this whole like oh, everybody right here is under my control, and I'm like more powerful, and my skin is kind of purple, wabba bop. It's like in the
Well,
comics.
it's interesting because they didn't actually make him purple. They gave him an affinity for purple in his taste for clothing.
No, but then his like
They
skin
used
and veins were
well,
all wacky
well
when
they
he got
used they used a
supercharged.
they used a purple filter sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess you're right. At the end, when he like drugged himself up, his stuff did turn purple. Well,
Anyway,
his blood vessels turned purple. But that the purple is because in the comics he's called the Purple Man, and he has the mind control powers. And I'm gonna stop talking now.
just that last bit where he's like, everybody under my control, fight each other right now. This will be wacky. That didn't like, I don't know. It just really didn't spook me as hard as some of his like really deep cut, like I want you to kill your parents.
Well, I think
Shit.
that was kind of the point, was that he was losing control of the situation, and so he was aggressively asserting control in like stupid ways.
I don't know. I just feel like they should have made it so that like I was as afraid of this motherfucker at the end as I was at the beginning,
Well,
which
but
is
see,
a
I
lot.
think that was the point though, was that you aren't as afraid of him by the end.
Oh, maybe that is part of Jessica's
That's
journey also.
what I'm saying.
But I swear to God, in the last scene, like before the final confrontation, where she's like rolling up on him or something, or it wasn't even her, it was like her friend. But I swear to God, she just has headphones in and she's like blasting death metal or something. I was so like, because the entire time, they're like trying to scheme about how to like deal with him, and I'm like, he has to command people verbally, like just fucking like a deaf person is completely immune to him or something, unless he like writes it down. And does that work? I don't even fucking know.
I don't
Um,
remember. I feel like they addressed it in the show, but I don't remember.
they made it hard to explain. He had like a
Um,
virus in him that made people
yeah,
obey.
yeah.
Some shit like that. But like fucking like how did that? I was a little cheesed. I was just like, how do you not come up with that sooner? Like to just like bum rush his ass and punch his head off. But uh, you know,
Well, there was a
put
little
some tunes
clever
on first.
moment where he told someone to put a bullet in your head, which clearly he means kill yourself. But
Yeah,
Jessica Jones just made this person like put a
put a
bullet
bullet
in
in
their
their mouth.
mouth, and they're like, "Look, there's a bullet in your head. You can stop trying to shoot yourself now."
Which, like, what the fuck? Like, his 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 ultimate control over people, his fucking power is like up to interpretation. That's crazy. Um, yeah, that's fucking. Anyway, I
Or
didn't care for
th-
Jessica Jones a whole lot. I think it was really interesting in a lot of ways.
it
And
was
Jessica's
good.
character arc was really cool.
It was
And
good.
the themes they hint
Yeah.
at about like being a survivor of like abuse and rape and all this stuff was like really interesting. But I didn't keep my interest
I was
towards
gonna
the
say
end.
it was good, but given Marvel's high standard when it's come to these things, for how amazing, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, how amazing Daredevil's been, how amazing Luke Cage was, how amazing I hope Iron Fist will be. Uh,
Yeah,
it was more mediocre, but mediocre when everything else is amazing still makes you pretty good.
yeah. Man, we end up talking a lot about like
Nerd
these
stuff, yeah.
Netflix,
That's
specifically
because
these Netflix Marvel
well,
bits,
that's
which
that's
like
because I live in a bubble where I'm a huge dork, so I'm super into comics and I watch all these comic things on Netflix.
you should start
And
the
I also don't
VHS.
have a social life, a significant social life. So like my workday schedule is like go to work, come home, feed myself, play video games, and watch whatever it is I'm gonna watch that night. And my weekend schedule is wake up whenever I wake up and watch something and play video games. And then Sundays just like clean your apartment and do your laundry and do your dishes and go grocery shopping because you need to feed yourself and stuff like
I don't know what the fuck I do on a daily basis.
that.
Um, I'm a big old garbage man. I applied to like fucking 10 jobs today.
Really? What kind of
Just
jobs?
oh
No,
fucking
sorry.
bullshit.
This is personal now. We don't need to talk about
We're
this
just,
on.
yeah, we're.
um.
I
Hmm.
was just jumping off our daily routine biz.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like VHSs, and I am definitely all about that because I've been into glitch art for a long time, and I am very exposed to the VHS, like vaporwave, synthwave, that kind of general aesthetic that I'm infatuated with, even though by now I'm sure it's already done to shit. But
Well,
that
I
won't
mean, if
stop
if
me
if
from.
you find aesthetic value in it, is again, it's not really go for it. Why not?
Okay,
There's no
I
harm in it.
like doing stuff. I like these things. There's this like camcorder app I got on my phone that like just records video but does like this kind of like
Oh
grainy
God.
static with the
Okay.
VHS
That
timestamp
at
and
that
stuff.
point, I would say you're going a little like you're not again, no harm, but like if I saw you doing that, I would definitely make fun of you a little bit.
You are Dave. You are one of a lot of people who talk shit about this. And I think it's totally like I don't do shit with this. I'm not gonna like I don't know how like this is a corny like thing to have this
You mean you're
VHS
not gonna make the
smartphone.
next hit found footage film?
No, if I
Oh
tried to
man,
if I
I'm so
tried to
glad those
make
are
a found
being
footage
like
film like this, it would become really transparent and it would look
I'm
really
so
fucking dumb.
glad that trend became like not popular real fast.
Found footage, I always liked that
That
concept.
that format, in my opinion, wore itself out so fast.
It there's definitely like only a certain amount of stuff you can do with it because it's such like an upheaval of the general sense of filmography. But like it does have like a very limited like range of storytelling within that. Um, anyway, I like found footage stuff. Something like Cloverfield, kind of. The thing is,
Well,
found footage doesn't
Cloverfield.
like suit a monster movie
I
that
was gonna
well,
say
as we've seen.
Cloverfield wasn't a great example of it, in my opinion. I think it was an interesting idea, though. Like, take a monster movie and pull the story down to the ground level.
Well, it definitely
You know,
wasn't a good
that's like
example, but the point of the struggle I'm talking about of found footage is that it's hard to make a good example. Like
that's like
Blair Witch Project is
yeah.
the thing,
Well,
but
the idea of the Cloverfield is interesting in the sense of, like say you walked into a Batman meeting and said, okay, well let's pull the story back for Batman into like one citizen of Gotham,
yeah,
and that's this whole story arc.
yeah, and maybe that would be an interesting short film. Is a dude like
A
gradually
dude
like
dealing with Batman's bullshit.
yeah, a dude,
A
a
dad,
dude,
a
maybe
dad.
a dad dude, maybe
Yeah, his
and
son
he's
gets sent to the hospital by Batman.
maybe
That
that's
would fit your Batman prejudice, wouldn't it? You bat hater.
maybe that's part of it. Maybe he's this dad, and he's like living on the rough part of Gotham as though there is a smooth part of Gotham. Um, and he like and it starts with him. He's just like eating his breakfast or whatever, and like the radio's on, and it's like on the news. It'd be like, oh, reports of a strange man wearing what appears to be a latex suit with ears. And he's just like, oh, what are they gonna think of next in this weird city? And then it like goes through like him like being exposed to Batman in the news like at different times or something. And then at some point like maybe no, and he's there alongside the rest of the city in coming to understand who Batman is to the point that like Batman becomes the accepted justice authority figure in Gotham. And then this is a pitch, and I'm trademarking this to Open Discourse tonight because I don't want anyone else to do this.
I'm sure it's been
Yeah, like
done.
that's legally binding.
I feel like
Because
it's
like
been done
please don't.
probably.
Um,
Yeah,
and then at
legally
some
binding.
and then at some
Please,
point
please
and then
don't.
maybe at some point like you jump forward to like a scene where it's like he finds himself he's tied to a giant chessboard or something because the Riddler is doing some shit, and Batman comes in and he's like, wow, and he's just like and he's thinking to himself like, man, I remember hearing about this dude and he was a fucking like a weird man on the news and now he's like saving my ass. And then like maybe it goes further where like his son who like is like 18 or something is just like he finds a fucking a plastic penguin mask in his drawer or something with like a latex with like this onesie that looks like a fake tuxedo, and he's like, where did you get this? Are you working for the Penguin? And he's like, no, it's like you're one of the you got sucked into the criminal boys. You're one of the Penguin's thugs. Oh my god, my own son, I can't believe it. Batman saved my life. This is a disgrace or something. That would be kind of fucked. I like that. That sounds cool. That's my idea. That's my pitch. That's my concept.
I did not know that you would go on such a tangent, but
It's a good
I
idea.
should have
It's a good
expected it.
idea. I think it's good. Fucking one-off issue. DC, hit me up. I'll write it, and you can hire me as a comic man for you. I'm starting to kind of get into my speech spiral where I start losing it. I've been dead sober this entire time. I'm sweaty. I'm sitting here very sweaty.
I'm also sweaty.
But
that should be the name of this podcast: the sweaty dudes podcast.
Welcome to the sauna. We're gonna fuck all of the noise out of our brain.
Forget I said that.
And this week's sweatometer, 2 liters.
Oh my god, stop. You're taking the bad joke too far.
I know, because my brain is just churning now with how fucking bad can I turn this weird Batman drama.
Oh, you know what? Here's some hot discourse you can talk about for a little bit, and I can just sort of lean back and relax.
The son comes back with bruises and stuff, and the dad thinks he's getting into fights at school, but he's actually gotten his ass kicked by Robin a couple times.
Oh my god.
Sorry.
So recently, I don't know if you followed this in the news. You might have. The government under Obama, the Department of Justice said we're going to start phasing out private prisons. We just did a full 180 on that.
Yeah, I did hear about that.
And it's interesting because they've also said we're going to crack down harder on marijuana. Basically we're going all in on the war on drugs is what that says to me. And they're defunding education. So to me it looks like they're creating a profit system for, these corporate prisons. But I'm sure you have a lot to say.
I don't have a lot to say. It's a classic idea of this school to prison. No, it's a classic example of the school to prison pipeline. Look it up, kids. Where we're gonna strip away abortion rights. We're gonna undo Roe v. Wade. So too many people are going to be born into poverty as a result of lowered reproductive rights. And then because of education, people are going to have very low opportunities and be, trapped in the cycle of poverty. So they will resort to crime more, and then they will be funneled into this profit-generating taxpayer dollar sucking the fuck out. Or maybe I guess just privatized. I don't know how private prisons make money, probably through they're torturing their inmates or something. And it just turns.
Well, it's the loophole in the amendment. I think that. Slavery is illegal except as a punishment for
exactly,
crimes.
And it still is. And you do not have to pay prisoners for work, and you can pressure prisoners into working at this stuff for either nothing or maybe fucking 1/5, 1/10. I don't know of the minimum wage. I don't know how it goes. It's fucking highly immoral, and it's a fucking. This is how white supremacists who fucking. In the year of our Lord 2017, think slavery should still be a thing, work their way around the system, is by making this convoluted fucking slavery system by making it's a whole thing. I'm not equipped with literature to talk about it at length because I'm not that smart and I'm not that well read, but I do understand that the school to prison pipeline is a convoluted front for an actual modern slavery. Exactly, it's setting millions of people, tens of millions, of maybe hundreds of millions, I don't know, of people up to fail. Especially prison being very cyclical, or people who go to prison get out of prison and then they of course go back because the world is stacked to give them opportunity.
Society treats ex-cons pretty brutally.
It's very cyclical, and
people wonder why recidivism rates are so high, and it's well. Consider the fact that you make everyone disclose whether they're an ex-con or not on job applications. Now, hypothetically, you can say until you're blue in the face that doesn't affect the decision, but everybody knows it affects the decision.
I would like a cultural movement to make that okay again. I don't know. Knowing what I know, if I being an ex-con,
I missed something. Continue. Yeah.
My point is, if knowing what I know, and culturally I understand the counter argument is that this is a risky thing and that is a bad idea. But hypothetically, if I were a man with a business, I would focus on trying to accept and like possibly even going out of my way to solicit applications from convicts based on my understanding of like how that prison system is. I would definitely pay very close attention to what the circumstances of their convictions were. Like if it was for drug possession, Jesus Christ, don't even worry about it. You're hired. Let me see your resume again, and compare it to the other resumes, and then you're hired. Something like that. I would try to like be kind of like objective about as much as I can claim to be and absolutely never be, and not judge based on stuff based on applications and like hire people. But I would really try to focus on fucking not taking prior convictions fucking seriously, because in a lot of cases it can be for nothing. Be that a like a drug possession, like say of marijuana, which is practically fucking nothing, or literally fucking nothing, as though it were like trumped up charges or something. There's this new documentary out that like Jay-Z has been doing that's like about a kid who was like suspected, not even like didn't even go to trial or nothing, was suspected to have stolen a backpack, and never went to trial and was held in Rikers prison for 3 years, where he was routinely tortured by the guards.
Wow, what do you know what this is called?
Oh, fuck. I've been seeing it advertised a lot. If you're on Instagram, keep it out. Khalif Browder. Yeah, the Khalif Browder story. Look that up. It's going to. I haven't seen it. I don't even know if it's out yet. I've only seen ads. It will make you sadder than you can possibly ever be.
Yeah, that sounds pretty messed up.
Not only is it a story of like an extreme human tragedy with this kid, but it also reflects a fucking insane, outrageous.
Well, I mean, Jesus, they're gonna torture a kid. Come on.
Series of injustices within our own fucked up air quotes justice system.
Yeah, no, that's super messed up. That is super messed up.
Yeah, fuck. So I will try to watch that. I read briefly about the story about this concept of the real life man Khalif Browder, and what went on, and that got me fucking cheesed enough that I'm clearly like going off on it now, and maybe this is just to the extent that I'm promoting Jay-Z's fucking documentary on Spike, but
yeah,
it's fuck. I want to watch it, but I also don't want. I just don't want to be any more depressed and disenfranchised and disillusioned and just dissed in my fucking deep soul. But it's important to see it to understand the extent of this nightmare that the world is, and get mad enough that I actually go to some fucking protests for once in my life.
Yeah.
I'm considering the 10th. On the 10th, I got a friend from Juniata is going down to the Indigenous Peoples March in Washington. I'm going to try to hit that up with him. So haven't gone to fuck all. And the science march is coming up sooner or later.
I'm definitely going to the science march.
Oh, we should have a special. We should
I mean, we
just
could
hang out
but...
at the march and just chat a little bit and try to record some of it. Well,
I mean, there's going to be one in Dallas where
I forgot.
They're happening all over.
Sorry, I thought we were going to be in the same city for a second. Anyway.
I mean, you could do one if you find anyone who wants to do one with you.
I think if we both go to it, we should definitely reconvene and then like have a podcast where we talk about it.
Maybe.
Maybe that just becomes like at least the big theme, and it'll just be part of, because we go for 2 hours on this shit.
Yeah.
We can talk about like I wouldn't think we could talk about just that for 2 hours, but we could do like a separate side bit.
My hope for the science march is that it stays on message, and I've gone off about this before, so I won't again. I just hope people stay on message, because I think facts are important, and please, I hope people put aside their pet causes and just facts are facts, are facts, are facts. 2 plus 2 does not equal 5. And, like, you know, you can talk about how the history of science is full of white men taking credit for other people's stuff later. Okay? Like, and maybe that's me being cavalier with it, but, like, you can't argue about fixing science or take issue with the problems in the, like, greater scientific society if there is none left.
Yeah, the internal discourse about science and the various injustices going on in that has to come after the fighting for the
right. And
science
my problem, though, is I've seen, like, people making science like, oh, like, you know, science has been bad to women and minorities, but we still need it. And it's like, don't even say that. Just say we need it. Like, I get it, I do.
You're not wrong, but
you're
like,
taking
here you
away,
are at
yeah,
the rally undermining
exactly.
the rest of us.
Well, it's not even that. It's that we are in panic mode. This is life support for science. Like, if you're on life support, like, if your kidney's failing and you need another kidney, you don't say, oh, by the way, he's got some problems with his left lung. We can't fix it while we're in there putting in a new kidney. But, you know.
Yeah. And you'd be like, well, damn it, Jerry. Maybe that'll be another surgery. We're already down here in the lower abdomen with all this shit open. We can't, like, switch now.
Right. Well, it's like, I understand the value in what's being said. The timing is important as well. And I think that's something a lot of people lose out on when they get sufficiently angry. And that's justifiable. Everybody gets angry. Everybody gets a little irrational. I'm guilty of it. You're definitely guilty of it too. I know for a fact we both are. And I get that. But this is a march about, and I get that it's on Earth Day, but this is a march that is ultimately about keeping science involved in legislation, keeping people accountable to facts and objective truth. Yeah. Any problems with the institutions involved can be done once we've assured that they won't be done away with, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. It's time to wrap it up.
Speaking of which, Steve Bannon.
No,
Stevie O. Bannon.
The old Banhammer.
Oh, God. He recently said on record, I don't know if he said it on purpose, like or said it to someone or was overheard saying it, but he said that all of these cabinet picks were meant to deconstruct their respective departments, which to me,
no shit.
Well, but they're not deconstructing them. It's just corporate protectionism.
Yeah. I think it's deconstruction. Like, fucking, it happens to also help corporations a lot, but, like, I'm sure.
Fair enough. Yeah, you're right.
But Betsy DeVos is definitely trying to shut down the entire education department if she could get away with it.
My issue with Betsy DeVos is the concept of school choice has merit. You know, people should be able to choose where they go to school. The idea makes sense. But the problem is, she is a Christian fundamentalist, which I personally am against. And she has never set foot in a public school, which is what she has power over now. That is her whole job, is public schools.
Yeah.
And her entire history of her actions in the political sphere have been undermining public schools to benefit not just private schools, but Christian private schools. And she's even gone so far as to say she's advancing God's kingdom. I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with, to steal some socialist
Betsy
terminology. I'm not okay with the Christian fundamentalists seizing the means of production for more Christian fundamentalists.
When the production is people and educations within them.
Well, and that's the crazy thing about people that get this far up in the food chain, is people become resources to them.
Yeah.
Like, as in not human.
Yes.
You know, and that goes back to, I think, the brief thing we touched on with maybe there's a conspiracy afoot in franchising so that the franchisee is the meat shield for the corporation, you know, in the event of riots.
Yeah.
Or protest.
I'm getting real bummed out again. Let's wrap it up.
Okay, yep. We're done.
This has been Open Discourse number 9. I'm Jay. I've been here with Dave. Hit us up at open-discourse.com. We got some articles on there, and facebook.com/open-discourse. We might be posting some, we might be sharing some links, sharing some videos and some such and things. It might be fun nerd, it might be nightmarish political contemporary stuff. And I'm gonna try to actually respond to Dave's proposals of interesting information that I should educate myself on by having this sort of obligation to do it on Facebook. That's our plan.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for listening, everybody.